Good evening and welcome to Hotline 21. This is a live interactive show brought to you by CAN TV and Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. If you would like to speak to us at any time, please call the CAN TV hotline number. I am Maria Marquez and I'm the Children's Advocate for the CAWC Shelter Program, which is called Greenhouse Shelter. For the next 25 minutes, my guests and I will be discussing the topic of children and families and domestic violence. And I would like to invite you to call in with your questions or comments. My guest for the evening is Vaishu, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm a counselor and advocate at CAWC, which is Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. We are an agency located in Chicago, and we primarily work with victims of domestic violence.
Yeah, well, we're talking about the shelter. I'm going to put really quick our shelter hotline, where you can call us 24 hours a day, any day of the year, we are there. Okay, so today we will be talking more specifically about our roles at the shelter directly, working with the kids, teens, and family unit that's there. But before we start with that, Vaishu, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what got you interested in this service?
Sure. Well, a little bit about myself. I do have around 2 years of experience working with women and their families and at the shelter environment. And how I got interested, Maria, this would take me back because it started when I was younger. I grew up in another country, in a South Asian country, where violence against women or inequality against women and children were seen on a day-to-day basis. And it got me really very interested to know more about it. Shortly after that, when I came to the U.S., I see that it was not just a communal problem, but it was also a very much existent global issue as well. And I would say most of my interest came from that, just like seeing the things that are happening around us and what we take for granted.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. Can you talk a little bit about the shelter program in general and kind of how many kids you see at the shelter at a time, at any specific time?
Sure. Our shelter is one of the oldest shelters in Chicago. We've been around for 40 years now, and we have 40 beds currently, but half of it is filled by the children because the moms have on an average, more than 2 children. Mm-hmm. So most of our shelter spaces is actually accommodated by children. So if, let's say, we have all 40 beds filled up, around 25 is easily just children of all ages.
Now, do you only accept families with children, or can you accept anybody?
We accept anybody.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So what is the age range of kids that you serve at the shelter? And do you happen to see kind of that a specific group of kids age-wise is coming more than another age?
Yeah, for the most part, we do get ages from infants and toddlers and to the age of 11 or 12. On a more regular basis, we do get lesser teens for some reason. We do accept girls up to the age of 18 and boys up to the age of 17. But let's say if we are accepting a girl who's turning 18 or is at the age of 18 at the time of intake at the shelter, we do accept her as an adult client.
Okay. We do have a children's program at the shelter, specifically where we provide things like daily activities for the kids, field trips or outings for the family or kind of the kids separately. We do individual children's counseling, children's groups, and family meetings as a whole that all of the counselors there are able to do. Can you explain some of the activities that you personally, as a counselor and advocate at the shelter, would do with some of the kids?
Sure. We do a lot of fun activities. To be honest, it really differs and depends on the kind of child that we're interacting with. Some children like more quieter activities and they will probably need more one-on-one time, whereas some children benefit from larger groups, so we try to kind of accommodate all of their needs together. Recently we've come up with with a theme strategy at the shelter, which kind of seems to benefit the children a lot. Like, for example, this week's theme is the beach theme, where one of the activities would be play volleyball in the park. One of the activities would be go to the aquarium, and things like that. So that's kind of like some of the examples of the activities that we do with the children.
Now, are most of the kids during the summer there the whole summer, or do they participate in summer camp programs?
We allow them to participate in as many activities and groups as possible, just so they can make the most of their time here and also benefit from what we're trying to offer them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what would a counseling session with a child look like, or a teenager?
Again, it would depend largely on the kind of teen or the child that you're interacting with, what their needs are, what kind of a person, what sort of a personality they have. So you as a counselor will really need to spend time with them, firstly to provide a safe space for them to feel comfortable enough, for you to understand them, for them to understand you, for you to be able to accommodate that by providing an activity of their choice, like let's say a kid with ADHD. We sometimes do have kids with special needs that come to us, and they would need extra patience and extra time for you. Extra time for you to actually get to know them better. And a board game would help them kind of concentrate, kind of like open up a little bit more, rather than like sitting one-on-one and asking them to talk about stuff that they not necessarily feel comfortable with or even know really how to communicate that.
Yeah, so I think it's really important what you're saying. It's kind of on a case-by-case
Oh yes, very much
thing
so.
with every child, but also that you're taking the time to kind of really see what does this child like to do, and building those interactions with the child of an adult and child where it's based off of I'm listening to like trust, safe spaces, because those might be some things that they didn't really have at school already.
Absolutely.
Or with their own families and friends, right? So what would a family counseling session look like?
It's very similar, again, understanding what's going on, the family dynamics a little bit. We kind of, we want to create a safe space for the mom and the child, so that they can be able to talk about what it like happened, and sometimes we discuss like nonviolent play with the kids and see. I mean, sometimes the moms would be a little, not distracted exactly, but then, I'm sorry, I'm trying to, but sometimes, it's hard for
Like
the families after
parenting skills?
Yeah, parenting skills would be, that's one thing that we definitely concentrate on, because after the abuse, a lot of the moms are very affected by the abuse, which can sometimes in turn lead to them not being able to give their all to the child and in the existing environment. So
because there's so much going on at
Yeah.
one time, right? Now, where do you receive all this training to be able to work with the kids, to the families, your counseling sessions? Where do you get that training?
we get the training at all the nonprofits here that work with victims of domestic violence. In fact, CAWC offers their yearly 40-hour training, which is where I got mine from, so that enables you to work with victims directly.
It looks like we have a caller, so caller, go ahead and ask your question, and thank you for calling us on our live show.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I was just wondering what kind of educational support is available for children at the shelter or homeless children in general.
Yeah, so as the children's advocate, but also counselors do help out with this at the shelter. When kids come in, if they're from 0 to 3, we help them find daycares if possible around the area or wherever it is that the family might be looking to relocate after the shelter. Kids who are 3 to 5, we help them get into preschools, and then 5 and above, we help them get into either the nearby school or high school, or they can stay at their home school, what we call their origin school, which is where they were going to school before they came to the shelter. What's really great is that we have these laws in place that allow transportation services to come to the shelter and pick up the kids, or CTA bus transportation, so that the families may keep going to the school where the kids were going originally. Something that's really important for these kids is stability. When not possible for the families to continue going to that school for safety purposes, then that's when we would talk about relocating them to the neighborhood school. Thank you for your question. Again, if somebody else has a question, you can call us at the CAN TV hotline up there. So as the children's advocate, I participate in these activities too that Vaishu was talking a little bit about. I also plan and coordinate some field trips that we might have. You said the aquarium, the beach. So those are things that we really try to do as a family. We try to nurture that child and caregiver bond as much as possible and as many times that we can through things like play and groups and counseling sessions. I also plan children's groups and parenting groups. During these groups, we talk about topics like teen dating violence, safety planning, bullying, self-expression, among other topics. I kind of look at what's happening right now with the kids and the families in the shelter and go from there to decide what is a good and appropriate topic to talk about this week with these groups. Some of the field trips may include things like going to the library, picnics, museums, the beach, and the zoo. Now, if you have any questions about our program at all, or if you are somebody that is in need of counseling services or shelter and are a survivor seeking those services, you can call our 24-hour domestic violence hotline at 773-278-4566. We have services available in multiple languages. Okay, now back to you, Vaishu. Can you explain a little bit about what a safety plan is? Because that is something that we hear a lot when we talk about children and domestic violence.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the most important things that we do once we accept clients into the program, especially children. So a safety plan is very, very broad. We would do a safety plan around school, we would do a safety plan around a place of work, we would do a safety plan around like a preschool or a play school, wherever the mom and the child are going.
And what does that really mean though, a safety plan?
So we talk to the kids about safety. How do you be safe if you're in this place? Call an adult. We tell them about 911. Then we tell them not to get involved in a fight if they actually witness something going on between the parents. Stay safe. For example, if something happened at school, let an authority know immediately. Let a teacher know. Let a trusted adult know what's going on so that they can help you. But don't put yourself in there because you're going to be in danger. And that's pretty much a broad explanation of what a service plan usually entails.
Now, do you find that when families come into the shelter, they kind of have an already knowledgeable idea of these safety strategies, or is this something that you're really talking to the kids about for the first time in their lives?
It depends on the ages. Like really young children normally do not know what happens. Some of them tend to get really confused or stuck in a situation. Or they're shocked when they see something very drastic happen between mom and dad. And some kids, the older kids especially, sometimes know a lot more. Okay, I need to call 911, I need to call a neighbor, I need to call an authority and let them know of what's going on. So we really try to get to know their families and the children when they come in, by talking to them, by providing that safe space, giving them that patience, giving them the time to be able to open up and communicate so we can understand their knowledge on what they know and on how to protect themselves.
Now, on average, how much time do you have to work with these kids when they're in the shelter?
For their safety plan, you mean?
For counseling in general groups, how long do you see a family in the trajectory while they're there?
Well, on an average, let's say a counseling session would be an hour or more, depending on what they have to say, the history of abuse especially. Many clients do feel the need to share a lot, and we also, with the children, we see that as well. They have,
And that's great because that can be really healing
exactly.
too, right?
Mhm.
For stories.
And they need that, and that's what we are there for, to provide that time, that space, and that support that they have lacked.
Great. Thank you so much, Vaishu. Is there a specific language? Sometimes I hear a lot of questions about, well, how do you talk to children who have experienced domestic violence? What would you answer to that question?
Could you repeat that?
How would
The
you talk?
language?
Yeah, what kind of
Oh,
language do you use around a child
it's-
or a teenager?
It is very simple. All they want is an adult who's very loving, who's very patient with them, and to be empathetic. And I think it takes a child or any human to be able to actually grasp that from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all, just to show that you really care on what happened and that you're there to help in
Yeah.
as much as possible.
And something else to add on to that, right, is do you ask the kids a lot about what happened? Like, do you ask them to retell those stories? Or is that something that you let happen naturally in conversation?
It depends. Again, like, when you understand the child, like, of course, some of the first things would be like, hi, how are you doing? How's everything? Are you settling in? Kind of ease them into the conversation, because sometimes it can be very harsh, I guess, to just ask the question point blank, very directly. So you can take it slow. I think it could go with all victims, because they have just gotten out of something very, very, very harsh. So
Yeah. So what would be your best advice for somebody who doesn't have the training that you as a counselor has with this, and somebody who's just trying to talk to maybe a nephew or a niece that has experienced domestic violence? What is your best piece of advice for how to have a conversation with that child about what's going on?
I would say take your time in learning to understand. Don't take offense if the child does not want to open up immediately. But be there for them at all times. Build their trust by showing support, by trying to talk to them every day. Ask them how their day was, or if they've eaten, or if what their friends are up to, and then create that bond, create that safe space, so that they're able to kind of open up.
Yeah, it's really about creating that safe space with that child, right?
Okay.
Some key things that I always talk to the kids about, and I always remind the children that come and the teenagers, is that the abuse is never their fault, right? Whatever is going on at home is not the child's fault.
Yeah.
We talk to them a lot about staying away from the fights, right? Sometimes in the chaos of what's happening, whoever might be in that altercation doesn't necessarily see that there's a child in the room, and then therefore that child might get caught up in something that wasn't meant to be directed towards them, right? So we always teach children to find a safe space that's away from that fight.
Absolutely.
As well as those safety strategies that you were talking about, like who is a trusted adult at school? Who is someone you can call if something happens at home?
Yeah.
Who is a neighbor that you can go and talk to who lives close by? Okay, so thank you for that. You talked a little bit about kids who come in who have special needs, right? Is there kind of anything differently that you do around those families, or, are you trained in that capacity?
To an extent, yes. But for the most part, what we do is definitely have more patience with children with disabilities, or with any individual with special needs, because, like I said, it does take more time with certain people compared to others, and we just need to understand that they're a little different and take that approach differently. Some of the examples, we would use the diagnosis of a child, or like refer them to a therapist if they don't have one, or ask the therapist to come to the shelter so that they can meet one-on-one with a child, and that can also like help the child receive the services that they require, or which we as non-medical professionals cannot provide.
Yeah. Now, do you have any trained therapists at the shelter who can provide these services for the kids?
Not at the moment. No, we do not. But
Well, we do have a trauma therapist, right?
Yeah, but-
So, are you talking more developmental therapy that they come into the shelter? Is that what you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to point to this really quick again. If you are someone you know is in an abusive relationship, or you do have a child that kind of in hearing us talk about this is a child that came to mind, this is a number that you can call. We have, other than our shelter program, we also have our main office that does counseling sessions with kids, the trauma therapist that may see families or parents or kids on their own. So there are services that aren't just directly in the shelter. Again, that phone number is 773-278-4566. So, Baishu, how can someone get involved in this work that you do at the shelter, or if someone's interested in working with kids who have witnessed domestic violence, where can they get involved?
You could visit our website, CAWC. There are a lot of volunteer opportunities. You can, of course, also do the 40-hour training, which gives you like a good insight into what this work is about. And you could get in touch with our volunteer coordinator.
Can you talk a little bit about the 40-hour training? Kind of what does that entail?
It entails, it covers all topics as to how to work with children, what is domestic violence, the cycle of violence, and just an in-depth understanding of abuse and how it affects families and their children.
Yeah, and something else I wanted to say is that a lot of these things like the cycle of violence, the power and control wheel, safety planning for children, safety planning for families, those are all some of the resources that can be found online too. If you just Google search maybe safety planning for children, domestic violence, then you'll pop up with you can find guides online too and trainings that you can read through if this is something that somebody you know is going through but they're not ready to seek for those services yet, and maybe you want to have those interactions with their kids, then those are things that you can kind of read up on your own, or also, like I said, call the hotline, talk to us about it and about how to get those services for those children. Now, what happens, talking about the shelter, right? What happens when a family calls and they have kids, a family of 6 perhaps, and there's not enough space for that family in the shelter?
We make sure we accommodate. If there's any space at all, and if the family in need is calling, it does not matter how many children they have, we do normally find ways to accommodate them. So it would be maybe moving some clients into different rooms to make sure we have room for the children and the mom coming in, and that happens on a very regular basis. And so we accommodate. There's no limit to how many children a mom can have, as long as she's in a safe place.
Yeah, and something I hear a lot too is people calling who say, there's no space anywhere, what do I do? So what happens when someone does call and you don't have any space in the shelter at all?
We try to provide them with resources, with numbers to other shelters in the city. We ask them if they have a specific location in mind, so we kind of can give them numbers to shelters in that area that they are interested in. And we try to provide them with as many numbers as possible. And we also encourage them to keep calling us, since our spaces can sometimes vary on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes some clients might decide to leave the next day. So we definitely encourage them to continue to call if they need anything. And we also additionally offer counseling support over the phone as well. So if we are unable to provide the shelter space, we do provide emotional support over the phone as well.
So you as a viewer, right, something that you can do is kind of carry around these phone numbers that might be useful, because you never really know when you're going to need those phone numbers, when you're going to need someone to give that phone number to somebody, right? Let me pull that up one more time for everybody. The phone number is 773-278-4566. And that is a 24-hour hotline. You can always call and somebody will pick up at that time. Domestic violence, as we've talked about, does affect children of all ages everywhere. We don't have the time to discuss everything and how children and families are affected. So if you do happen to have any more questions, please call us at that hotline number and we will be there to answer those questions that you may have. If you're interested in the 40-hour training, look on our website, Connections for Abused Women and Their Children, and you will find more information on that. Thank you so much for joining us today on our show. We are out of time. Thank you once again, and please
Thank
join
you.
us the fourth Tuesday of every month for our show. Thank you,
Yes.
Vaisha, for
Thank you,
joining me
Maria.
today.